You've probably heard a ton about the promise of AI in healthcare, right? Smarter diagnoses, better treatments, super efficient care. But what if that same technology, the one designed to help us, is hiding a really dangerous flaw? Today, we're going to dig into a cautionary tale about what happens when AI gets it wrong.
All right, let's just jump right in with a question that honestly sounds a little crazy. Can artificial intelligence actually make healthcare less fair? You'd think the opposite, but in one of the most important real-world examples we've seen, that is exactly what happened.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. On one hand, you've got this amazing goal, using powerful tech to get better health outcomes for everyone. But on the other, there's this hidden risk lurking in the background, that the very same systems could end up reinforcing the exact inequalities we're trying to fix. So how does something like this even happen? Well, to get it, we first need to look at how predictive models are taking over modern medicine. We're talking about major healthcare systems, often using big platforms like Epic, that are relying more and more on these AI tools to make some pretty critical decisions.
And look, the idea behind all this was actually really good. The goal was to use data to pinpoint the patients who are most at risk, get them care faster, and use resources way more efficiently. I mean, on paper, it sounds like the perfect job for an AI, right?
But this is where things start to go sideways. Let's zoom in on one specific algorithm that's been studied a lot, and the simple, seemingly logical idea that led to a deeply flawed prediction.
Okay, so the people building this thing had a problem. How do you teach a computer what sickness means in terms of data? They landed on what seemed like a smart shortcut, healthcare cost. The logic felt sound. If someone costs the system more money, they must be sicker, which means they need more care. Simple, data-driven. What could go wrong? Well, that one simple, logical step, that was the fatal flaw. And what's so fascinating here is why it was so wrong. The data, it turns out, was not telling the whole story.
And this right here, this is where it all fell apart. The algorithm saw lower spending from certain patients and concluded, great, these people have a lower need for care. But the human reality? It was the complete opposite. Lower spending didn't mean better health, it often meant less access to care in the first place. The AI was literally looking at a symptom of inequality and mistaking it for a sign of health.
So what happened? The result was, well, it was devastating. The AI learned a pattern from our unequal world, and because of that, it systematically underestimated the health needs of the most vulnerable people, essentially flagging them as healthier than they actually were.
Okay, so why? Why did this happen? It's so tempting to just think, oh, it must have been a bug in the code, right? A glitch. But the real answer is actually way deeper and honestly, way more important for us to understand.
See, this wasn't a coding error. It was a design error. The mistake wasn't some technical typo. It was in the fundamental assumption they made right at the start, choosing cost as a stand-in for need. It was a failure of strategy and critical thinking, not a failure of programming.
And this gets to maybe the biggest lesson in all of this. AI isn't out there just inventing new biases out of thin air. It's more like a giant magnifying glass. It finds the quiet, hidden biases that already exist in our data and our society, and then it amplifies them at an incredible scale. And you can see how this one little flaw just explodes into a massive strategic risk. And we're not just talking about healthcare anymore. The consequences of getting this wrong are huge, and they're far-reaching.
The fallout is immediate. First, bam, your reputation is toast. Nobody wants to be the poster child for biased AI.
Then, of course, the regulators come knocking, and that leads to investigations, potential fines, the whole shebang.
But it's deeper than that, right? Beyond the headlines and the money, it's a profound ethical failure. You're betraying the very people you were trying to help.
And all of that boils down to one thing, a complete and total loss of trust. And once that's gone, well, good luck ever getting it back.
Okay, so how do we stop this from happening again? Because this story isn't just about doom and gloom. It's really about learning how to build this stuff the right way, from the very beginning.
So what are the big takeaways? First, you have to obsess over your starting assumptions. The variables you choose, like using cost for need, matter way more than what fancy algorithm you use. Second, test for fairness, not just accuracy. An algorithm that's 99% accurate but biased against 1% of people is a failed algorithm. Third, challenge your data. Don't just blindly trust it. It's a snapshot of our messy, often unfair past. And finally, ethics has to be baked in from day one. It can't be an afterthought.
Look, at the end of the day, AI has this incredible, almost unbelievable potential to make our world better.
But without careful, critical, and ethical design, it can just as easily reinforce the very problems we're trying to solve. And that's why any AI strategy that's built to last must include ethics, not as an add-on, but as its absolute core principle.